Welcome to episode 6 of Echoes from the Arena. This is entitled Women in Sports, Part 1, in a continuing series that we plan to have from time to time, discussing the role of women in the history of sports and women's sports in general. Greg, I'm going to turn the role of host over to you for a bit as you take us through the history of three women who were maybe lesser known but pioneers and have significant roles to play in the role of women's sports.
Thank you. Glad to do it. Yes, these women were I like the fact that you use the word pioneer because they were pioneers. They were innovators. They changed the game for the better. Each one would be considered a generational talent. And we are going to start with a tennis player who was playing in the early part of the 20th century, Suzanne Langevin. She
Who
was
I
born in
who I had never heard of,
Never
but
heard of her. Okay,
no.
well we're gonna give you a lesson tonight on her. She was born in 1899. Her nickname, I'm sure this came from the French press, was called La Divine. She was I As a child she was quite sickly, and her father was looking for an activity which would hopefully improve her health, so he chose tennis, which was beginning to take hold at this time in France, and he became her coach. He was given the period, he was hard, he was strict, he was I guess we call him a disciplinarian, but his tactics worked because at the age of 14, she made the final of the French Championships, which was the precursor to the what we now call the French Open. Though
Mhm.
she lost that match later that year, uh, the she was the champion of the World Hard Court Championship, and this was 1914. And as I said, she was only 14 years old. I guess her dominance in the sport lasted from 1919 to 1926, where she was virtually unbeatable. And during this span, now in those days, these players are amateurs.
Right.
And during that span, she lost a mere match, one match, and she went on a 181 win streak,
That's it.
match streak, match victories. Her career record, when she was all said and done, she had 341 wins, seven losses. Now that if you do the math, that's like a 98% win rate.
Wow.
So needless to say, she was quite dominant.
Why do we not know anything about her?
I don't know because she's a name that, and I guess maybe because, well, we're both tennis players, but I watch a lot of tennis, and the fact that I'm very interested in sports history and kind of, call myself a sports historian. Now that I'm no longer a history teacher, I changed my title, so
Hmm.
I heard of her, and I knew she was a player who had immense talent and changed the game. The game, when she appeared on the scene, was more of a baseline game.
Hmm.
You volley from the baseline. You wore long, cumbersome outfits. Your 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 shoes were difficult to play in. You don't didn't hit the ball very hard. It was more placement.
Was that on
Um,
purpose or is that because
I think that was
that's
just a sign of the times. I think that was just customary, being the sign of the times. She
was
so
it not
she
gentlemanly or not
I
gentlewomanly
think it was
to hit the
wasn't
ball
yeah, it
hard?
wasn't gentle. It I'll bring it up shortly, but it wasn't gentle womanly, I guess. It wasn't the way a woman acted. A woman should not have been super aggressive, super competitive.
Yeah.
Just weird, weird customs of the day.
I'd say fuck that and blast the wig off
That's
same
right.
day.
Well, that's pretty much what she did. She transformed the game.
I'm sorry,
Um,
powdered wig, I meant to say.
she she played an all-court game.
Mhm.
Not only was she an innovator on the court, she was an innovator regarding the fashion of what women would wear on the court. She was the first player to wear pleated skirts that were halfway down the calf. She wore sleeveless tops, and she was famous for her bandana or scarf around her head.
Huh.
She was athletic. She was very physical. She hit a flat ground stroke, and she volleyed. She came to the net and played almost a serve and volley game. Being, being the superior athlete that she was able to win 6 Wimbledon singles titles, 7 French championship singles titles. She also won the gold medal at the 1920 Antwerp Olympics for
Well,
singles. She
that's a good
also,
that's a good trivia right there.
yes, that's a great trivia. She also managed to,
1920 Olympics, Summer Olympics, where were they?
yes,
Yeah.
Antwerp, Belgium. She also won that same Olympics. She won silver in doubles and she won bronze in mixed. So someone that was again, she was very charismatic. She
She,
was.
I have a
Yeah, go
few
ahead.
things.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
want to let me interject here
Yeah, go ahead.
for a moment. I would say, judging by her record alone, she should be more known in general sports history circles, I would say,
I would agree.
let
I,
alone tennis sports history.
I was doing when I was researching.
7 losses.
Well, it's amazing.
That's ridiculous. It's almost, it's hard to, it's
Well,
hard to
think of that
quantify.
today. Put it into today's. Today we talk about the greats. You know, the Williams sisters, Steffi Graf, Chris Everett, Martina Navratilova.
Now, granted, they were playing many fewer tournaments back then.
They were playing fewer tournaments, yes. And obviously we didn't have the mass media that we do now.
But if you put it up against the win record, it doesn't matter
Right, exactly.
because it's like
Exactly.
the win percentage is so absurd. So I was going to say that judging just based on that, uh, I should have heard of her already.
Right.
I wonder if it's because she's not American,
It could be,
and
but
we tend to do that.
when someone talks about the history of modern tennis, and by modern I'm talking, a tennis after the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century, usually when there's a discussion about, the game,
I hear Margaret Court's name.
she's well, Margaret Court's in there, but Suzanne Langland's usually in there.
Is she? Okay.
Someone who we're going to talk about a little bit later, Alice Marble, usually is not, which is unusual because she too had a imposing record. Also, a player which I'm going to talk about in a second here, another American,
Mhm.
Helen Wills, who later became Helen Wills Moody, was a great champion at the time that Langland played. But how many people know Helen Wills?
I've also
Have
never
you
heard
heard
of
of her?
her.
You never heard of
No,
her either? Okay.
if, if you said Helen Moody, I'd assume sounds like a great blues musician.
But yeah, and then well, just to talk about her, a very notable highlight of Suzanne Langland's career was a match between her and Helen Wills. They played it in Cannes, France,
Con, I
or
believe.
Cannes, is it Cannes?
Con.
In 1926. At the time, it was deemed the match of the century,
Mhm.
and Langland won 6-3, 8-6. So in straight sets. So a very, as I say, a very interesting character. She was known for her outspokenness. She would flip rackets now and then. She would
Uh,
sip cognac during the changeovers. So
I
there you go.
I
I guess she could
I
be considered
understand why
the
that
bad
could
girl of
not.
tennis.
I understand why that shouldn't be done.
What's
With
that?
kids watching, sipping
Oh,
cognac
oh, so from
in the
cognac.
middle of breaks, but I could also see that working to your benefit
Yes,
to just kind of
definitely.
loosen you up a
It
little bit.
loosens you up. Yeah, loosens you up. Deal with.
Yeah.
They didn't have sports psychologists back then, so I
Well,
guess you would
that
take a
was the
nip
sports
of cognac.
psychology. Yep.
So there you go.
Interesting.
So that's a little tutorial on Suzanne Langlet. She is in the
Langlin?
I believe it's pronounced Langland, yes.
How's it spelled?
It is spelled L A
Langlin.
it is spelled Lenglan, Longland. And unfortunately, she died young. She died at age 39 of pernicious anemia, which
Mm,
was a inability to process B12. So
jeez.
a very meteoric career. But she made her, as I say, she made her statement both with her on-court uh, instinctive play, her aggressive play, and then the fashion uh, part of the game.
Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. I have to imagine the sleeveless thing either drove people nuts or pissed some people off.
Well, I'm sure it did
Something
both.
fierce.
It did both. Okay, moving on. As I said, there's three that we're going to discuss.
That's one.
The next one is an American. Her name was Mildred Babe Dietrichson
Mm.
Zacharias. She was the seventh child of Norwegian immigrants who settled in Port Arthur, Texas. She received the nickname the Babe after she slammed 5 home runs in a childhood baseball game.
Oh,
And I
so
referenced the
Babe
Babe,
Ruth,
Babe Ruth.
who I also don't really like that much.
Yeah, Babe, I don't know. I don't want to be, I don't want to be, I don't want to say that he was overrated, but I don't know. I really don't know. I think if you took in all the factors like the dead ball era
Uh-huh.
and the fact that pitchers pitched 9 innings, that
And they
there
were
really wasn't
throwing, it's like
relieving.
you were throwing, yeah.
Yeah.
How many of those homers were against guys who are dead ass tired?
Yeah, their arms are dead. Late innings,
I don't want to
so
get
I
off
don't
on
know.
I don't want to get off on any kind of jag or anything, but it seems like the greatest players from some of these sports are some of the guys that I can't stand. Wayne Gretzky can't stand him. Babe Ruth can't
If
stand him. I question how great they are
I was ranking
compared to their
hitters,
peers.
um, well, yeah, well, you had,
But
Babe had Garrick, who I thought was an amazing ball player, and certainly a better athlete. Although Babe was I would say Babe was a better athlete than most people thought. But
at what? Putting down
well,
hot
he putting
dogs
down
or
hot dogs
and
and beer.
booze.
But
I don't know what I
yeah,
guess when I say peers, I didn't mean like his time in um like chronologically. I mean just like other baseball players. I just wonder how great those players were comparatively compared to guys today. If you take a guy who's like a borderline AAA player now
right, right.
and you put him in 1925, isn't he just slaughtering the ball?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. Okay, so Babe had the career home run record for years.
Yeah.
So who breaks it? Hank Aaron.
Thank God.
Now, Hank Aaron was playing in an era where, okay, let's face it, it's tough because you're comparing eras and that's not always fair, but you had better athletes playing the game.
Hmm.
You had pitchers, you had short relievers, you had long relievers, you had closers by then.
They
So
existed
he,
by then.
so he was looking at good pitching late in the game. So,
I think it's a much more impressive feat.
is he more impressive than well, what Babe Ruth did? Or how
But then
about
they're
the other
gonna
guy?
say, but then they're gonna say the the argument against that is, well, he played so long.
Yeah, yeah,
And the counter argument to that is your greatest ability is your availability.
right, exactly. Exactly.
That's quote Josh Allen.
That's that's a that's a very true quote.
Mhm.
All
I'm
right.
sorry to get us off of
No, that's fine.
Babe
No, that's fine.
Diedrichson. Let's
Because
continue.
that's fine. That's what we're here for. We're here to discuss sports history, all sports history. Even though we're discussing the ladies this evening, but if you've got a question, but this is the time to ask it.
Yep.
What I liked about Babe is she was a multiple sport athlete,
Yes,
and
that I knew about her.
most pro athletes will tell you, even to this day, that no, you don't concentrate on one sport at a young age. You play multiple sports through high school. And
Mhm.
once you get into college, if you want to specialize, if you're going to if you're if you want to be a pro football player, then you specialize in that sport. But how many NFL players have played other sports? Probably most of them, right?
Mhm.
I mean, a lot have played baseball, a lot have played basketball. Uh, Many of them are track and field athletes.
Keon Coleman dropped over 40 in someone's charity
Yeah,
basketball
yeah, the
game the other
charity
day.
basketball game. Yes, so there you go. So she was a multiple sport athlete. She excelled in basketball. She actually was playing for her company's senior women's team called the Golden Cyclones. And through that, and I'm not sure exactly how she became an All-American, but she won All-American honors. I'm assuming this was like I don't know if it was an amateur or a pro league, but I do remember a lot of companies back in the day had their own teams, and they played in various city leagues. So she was dominant in that league.
So like now, as we would hear of an All-American in a college, in an
Yeah,
intercollegiate
just in
athletics,
college. Yeah,
this is an All-American in just another type of league,
right, right.
right?
Yeah, I think that's what they were getting at.
They just hadn't gotten to the intercollegiate athletics, maybe, or these leagues were big enough and maybe important enough to have All-American honors.
But to be honest with you, probably women's basketball in this was most likely in the 30s. They might just not have been popular enough to. There was no pro league.
Well,
Um, I don't even know if I don't even, I'm sure there were some colleges that
maybe
had had women's teams, but
in
I'm
the
sure that,
20s, I don't know. But it might
or
have been
maybe not.
might have been
Yeah,
club teams.
on club teams, yeah. And this is basically what this is. These are club teams, these
Yeah.
corporate teams, but very very popular with regards to basketball and baseball in the because a lot of the early major league players grew up playing in industrial leagues, baseball leagues now. She also became a dominant track and field star, and she was a very active in 1931 AAU
Mhm.
um, track meet, where she entered 8 events and she won six and tied one. And she was certainly uh, a key factor in the fact that her team won the meet. Off of that, she was a member of the 1932 Summer Olympic track and field team. She won gold in the javelin throw, which that was the first year it was contested for women. She also won gold in the 80 meters hurdles, where she set a world record, and she won silver in the high jump.
That's very impressive.
So that was impressive. So
Quite the
she goes from,
resume.
yes, she goes from basketball to track and field, and not just a field or a track event. She did both. So it was almost like a pentathlon type of thing. She took up golf in the mid 30s, and believe it or not, she won her second tournament she entered.
Believe it.
Lost her amateur status because she earned money
Money.
through endorsements.
Ugh,
Wasn't prize money from the tournament, it was
my
money through
God.
endorsements.
I roll NCAA. I
Yeah,
roll.
yeah. She she was, however, she was reinstated in 1943, and she went on to win both the U.S. and British amateur titles. She turned pro in 1947, claimed 41 LPGA victories, won 10 major championships, including multiple U.S. Opens, Western Opens, which was a major tournament back in the
It's
day.
still a pretty big tournament.
Yeah, it's still a big tournament. And numerous title holders championships.
Mhm.
She helped found the LBGA. I don't know, I can't say that.
LPGA.
She helped found it in 1950, serving as its president from 1952 to 1955.
Mm.
And in 1950 and 51, she was the leading money winner on the tour.
While
Not
she
a big
was
surprise since she won the majority of the tournaments. And once again, she was very her personality. She was very competitive. Obviously,
Mhm.
uh, could be abrasive, could be outspoken. She smoked on the course. She sweared on the course. So
So were the guys.
just right there with the guys. Yes. One of her famous, I have it here. One of her famous quotes was loose regarding her golf was to loosen my girdle and let her fly. So there you go.
That's funny.
She had numerous honors. She won the AP Female Athlete of the Year 6 times, from the mid 30s to the mid 50s. She was honored as Woman Athlete of the Half Century in 1950. She was inducted into the LPGA and Golf Halls of Fame. Also, she's in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame and the National Women's Hall of Fame. So there you go. So a true trailblazer, a multiple sport athlete, and one of the founders of the LPGA.
Very deserving of the honors bestowed upon her. Somebody that I had heard of, and I honestly I can picture her in my head from all of the Guinness Book of World Records that I had. I believe she held some world records for a while.
I do remember watching a biopic of her. I think it was made in the 80s. It was, believe it or not, it was, I forget who played her, but her husband, George Zaharias, was played by none other than Alex Karras.
Oh, who used to play for the Lions
He was playing for the Detroit Lions, and then he was
and
on
was
the
in Gunsmoke.
was in Gunsmoke, and also appeared on Monday Night Football for a while. So there you go.
And that right there is a perfect example of piece of information that I will know that will never make me any money,
That's right.
ever, ever at all.
That's right.
I was not alive for any of those things. May maybe the Monday Night Football part. I don't know.
Yeah, you would have seen him on Monday Night Football. I believe he was the second group after Don Meredith retired or moved on. I think
So we have to be post
Karras was in
80
the booth.
82 because 80
Yeah,
I wasn't born until 83.
yeah, because Monday Night Football started in what, in 71?
Once again, not alive, don't
Yeah,
know.
'cause I was in high school. I was a senior in high school, and the first game was, believe it or not, I remember that the very first game was the Browns against the Jets with Joe Namath. And I believe the first broadcasting crew, was actually Keith Jackson. I do not remember who was
Whoa,
doing the
Nelly.
play-by-play.
That Keith Jackson.
Yes, not Keith Jackson. Yes.
Love that
Not the
guy.
tight end. Yes. All right.
What
Any
you
questions? As I would
nope.
say in my class, any questions?
No, Mr. Riggio.
So we can move on to the
Yes.
third and final athlete of the evening. And someone else, which, as we said earlier, not a lot of people know about her. And I didn't know a lot about her being a tennis player and someone who really loves the history of sport.
Hmm.
I heard the name, I knew the name, but knew very little about her until I bought a book about 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Ironically, I was living, as you know, in Atlanta at the time, and the author was from Marietta, Georgia, which is just down the road from where I was living. Very good book, and her name is Alice Marble, and she came out of California, San Francisco area, and she was again a very um, athletic player, outspoken, did a
Alice or Ellis?
Alice Marble. She was very, very quick, played a aggressive serve and volley game, kind of the game that Langland played, but but this time now it has, changed. It's evolved. So, Alice was a very dominant player. She was she won the U.S. Nationals, which again was the
Precursor to the
precursor to the
Open.
U.S. Open. She won it 5 times.
Oh, that's
She
it.
won it in 1936, then again in 38 through 40. She also won one Wimbledon singles title in 1939, but she amassed 18 Grand Slam titles, five in singles, six in women's doubles, and seven in mixed doubles. In 1939 and 40, she was ranked, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. In 1939, she was number one in the world.
Okay.
And in 1939 and 1940, she was the AP Female Athlete of the Year.
Hmm.
She had an unbeaten string from 1939 to through 40. She was 45 and 0. She won 111 matches during that time frame
Without losing?
without losing. So there you go.
Wow.
She and she had she had some adversity in her career. She actually in the mid 30s she contracted tuberculosis and had a bout with pleurisy,
My
but
God.
defeated that and came back to
Wow.
win, to become number one in the world and win those Wimbledon and those U.S. national
Did
titles.
we have a cure for tuberculosis at the time?
Uh, no, no, because if this was that was is tuberculosis is it a bacteria? Because
I,
pre this was pre antibiotics.
I don't know. I'm not at work, so.
And the pleurisy would be a side effect, I believe, of the tuberculosis. And she had a very
Yes,
interesting,
it's a bacterial infection.
was it bacterial? Okay. Well, we didn't have, I don't believe we had any antibiotics at the time. So she was, because the antibiotics really didn't show up until the 40s, I believe,
Hmm.
with the, advent of World War II.
I just can't believe she contracted tuberculosis and was able to continue a playing career.
And I remember that being discussed in the book. And, she had many dark days that she thought, her career was over. As a matter of fact, she thought her life was over. Very sick and just fought back, and I think a lot of it is just sheer will and just, doing what you need to do to heal up. I have a fly in here that's driving me nutty. That's why I'm
Mm.
swatting things.
I thought you were just talking with your hands a lot.
But she had some interesting she had some, she well I want to bring up something else first and then I'll talk about her post competition career. She in those days again, money was not
You couldn't,
grandiose.
you really couldn't, you
You
could
really
hardly,
couldn't live on what you won
yeah.
playing tennis. They did do a lot of barnstorming. They did do a lot of exhibitions to
Mhm.
augment their income.
Right.
She
But
taught
they had
the
to.
game, but she had a benefactor. She had benefactors, two very well-known benefactors that really helped her through some rough times. That those benefactors were Clark Gable and Carol Lombard.
Oh,
So she spent time with them, actually lived at their house for a short time in Hollywood, taught them the game, but just another layer of her interesting life. When
I'm,
she, yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
glad, I'm glad you didn't say Bartles and James.
Oh no. Nope. Um, Post tennis, she worked as a singer,
Mhm.
a motivational speaker, clothing designer, which we're going to get to in a minute. And then she
I
served
mean,
briefly with
she basically pushed herself through tuberculosis. I think she's
basically,
probably
yes.
well qualified to be a motivational speaker.
Yes. And briefly she worked at DC Comics as an associate editor on a series called Wonder Women of History.
Hmm.
Now, getting back to the fashion designer,
Yeah.
she was another one like Langland who um, her outfits were for the time were controversial. She
Mhm.
wore shorts on the court with like a polo top and
Yeah.
a hat which was much like a baseball hat. So again, the fashion is changing, allowing
That's really
female
pushing the envelope
players to be
then.
more, competitive and ability to move,
Hmm.
much like the men. Yes, that was being very ahead of the curve, so to speak. As we were talking before we did the show, she was she claimed to be a spy, and various historical sources have been unable to identify the smoking gun where they could unequivocally say, yes, she was a spy. But
When you
in
say
her
spy, we're talking World War II
World
spy.
War II, I'm sorry, we're talking World War II. I remember from the book that I read
Hmm.
that I prefaced earlier, she was in a relationship with a gentleman from Europe. They
Uh,
went to, and I think the insinuations were that he was involved with somehow with the German government, possibly espionage.
mhm.
Okay, so they were in Switzerland and she was gathering financial intel on the Nazis.
Mm.
Allegedly, she was wounded by gunfire, survived, and the account was in a book that she had, her autobiography. So, certainly I'm not saying that this is all made up, but it's unusual that historians can't seem to connect the dots, so to speak.
Unless they're that well hidden.
That could be well hidden. Yes, it could very well be well hidden. She was also a civil rights pioneer. Okay, so in 1950, we had a young African American girl by the name of Althea Gibson.
Mm-mm.
And you and I go to the U.S. Open every year. We've seen the statue of her
Yep, I know it well.
outside the tennis center.
Excuse me.
Well, when she burst on the scene, she was winning tournaments, minor tournaments with ease. But at the time, it was very difficult for her to qualify for the Open. A lot of politics, a lot of nonsense was going on.
Racism. Let's just call it
Well,
what it is.
racism, definitely. And so Alice Marble wrote an editorial for a lawn tennis magazine where she basically chastised the establishment. for not allowing this girl to play. And in later years, Althea Gibson credited Ellis Marble for being the driving force behind getting her in the Open or in
Hmm.
the U.S. Nationals at Forest Hills at the time. And also to go back, players that followed her, Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova, their game was her game. So she was the pioneer when it came to this that serve and volley game. So
I think of a lot of, I just to tie this back to us, I think of a lot of watching Wimbledon, um, when we lived on Worley and just pictures of Martina Navratilova,
mhm,
uh, with like that half, either half volley or that high volley kind of mid-court as she's
mhm,
coming in, attacking the net,
yeah,
kind of always moving forward when
chip
the
and
opportunity
charge.
presents itself.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. Well, I remember. I didn't. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if I told you this story. I think I probably did, but I don't know. Um, your Uncle Bill and I, um, Uncle Bill met a woman by the name of Lee Jackson in Marco Island.
Mhm.
We used to go to the tournament there. And well, you know your Uncle Bill.
Is
He'll
that on
talk any.
the Virginia Slims tour?
I don't think it was called the Virginia Slims at the time. I think it had changed by then. But the tournament was at the time, the tournament was sponsored by BMW.
Hmm.
And it was at the Marriott Hotel.
I know.
And we
Love it.
were Uncle Bill, who talks to anybody and
Uh-huh.
everybody, met this woman named Lee Jackson. So Lee Jackson was the tour referee of the WTA back in those days. So she basically managed all the tournaments. And I forgot where I was going with it. But what we talking? Oh, were you talking about what were we talking about? What was
Well,
I?
you were talking about why you brought up Uncle Bill.
I brought him Uncle Bill, but there was a reason I brought him up because we met Lee Jackson. Oh, I know. No, I know now.
Okay.
Also, so anyway, so uh, Lee Jackson, after we went came back home and what have you, she invited through Bill. She invited Bill and me to a women's tournament, um, a pro tournament
Uh-huh.
in Princeton, New Jersey, at Princeton University at their facility. So we went for the final. The final was Chris Everett versus Martina.
Oh
Martina
wow.
wins the tournament in three sets.
What year is this?
This would have been in the 80s. So afterwards, Lee Jackson comes, finds Bill and me, tells us that uh, Martina will be at a cocktail mixer after the tournament, and we're welcome to join her. It was I believe at the time, one of Martina's sponsors was CompuWare. I don't know if you've ever heard of that company. It was one of the early
Yeah.
computer companies.
Uh-huh.
So they were throwing the party. So we go there, and long story short, Martina comes in. Uh, Lee waves her over. She introduces us to
Martina.
her, and me being a lefty and playing a lot of tennis in those days, my left arm was pretty big. So Martina and I compared left arms. Martina's was much bigger than mine. So
Much larger.
there you go. So that's my story, and I'm
I don't
sticking
know
to
that
it.
I don't know that I have
Did I
heard
ever
that one.
tell you that?
I don't think so.
So yeah. But it was a joy. So but yeah.
Interesting. So only one of these three women had I heard of prior to us discussing them, um, and this evening, and that's Babe Didrikson. Um, it's interesting that it. it's interesting that I know that we want to talk about at a later time kind of the modern state of women's sports, but I just want to
Hmm.
make this point, which is think about the fact that there have been multiple pioneers that on the women's tennis side that have pushed that sport to the place that it is now, where
Hmm.
it's arguably bigger than the men's game.
Hmm. I agree. I
And
agree.
it's because of those trailblazers, because I can think of a half a dozen others off the top of my head that we haven't even talked about.
Right, right,
One in particular that we're going to talk about.
right.
Um, but you can see what players and people of that quality
Hmm.
do do for the game and push that game forward
Right.
like that.
Well, I'm not knocking any sport, any of the team sports or whatever,
No, I
uh,
know, but I'm just
individual
saying
sports.
compared to where some of these other sports are, you can see the work that has been done in
Oh yeah,
women's tennis
no, I
because
agree.
of how far ahead it is um,
Well, I think it was.
compared to its peers.
I think. Well, what I was saying, and you and I have been to a slam, a grand slam,
Multiple
for many
times.
years now. Um, but just look back, even in the '80s,
Yep.
when other sports were struggling to get spectators, women's sports now, to get any kind of spectators at any of their competitions, tennis,
At least the slams.
semis and yeah, the slams, semis and finals were sold out for
Yeah.
the most part.
Yeah.
So you had interest there. And
hmm
like you and I have talked about, uh, I personally playing the game like I do, and you playing the game, I just think today, and again, the Sinner Alcaraz match was a classic,
But it's the exception, not the
but
rule.
it was the exception. It was the exception because most of men's tennis, now granted, it was played on clay,
So it's going to slow the game
but
down.
anything I fear again when we get to Wimbledon final, we're going to see basically booming serves,
hmm
one, two, maybe three rallies, and then
Overhead or
and
winner
then a
or a
winner. And
yeah.
on the men's side, I think the women's side, you're going to get more construction of points,
hmm
more movement, and I just think it's a more competitive game. And
And that
you've got
kind
players
of
now, they've got parity really in the women's game now. It's Sabalenka, Coco Gauff, Pagula, things
mhm.
like that, or people like that. So,
It's interesting that you said construction of a point because it seems that in the other sports, the construction of the point is also what differentiates those games.
oh yeah, yeah,
Men's hockey to women's hockey. Not having the ability legally to throw huge body checks. There is contact. Those who say that there's no contact clearly don't know the game. But
no, well, there's contact, yeah.
um,
Well, the
you have to
NBA, versus the
crush it.
WNBA.
And I was going to go there too. Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'll let
Well,
you
no, that they're
take
not
the floor.
playing as high above the rim as the men are, so the construction of points looks different.
Hmm.
And I think that we're finding out that there's a market for that
And I
as the players
see,
become more talented and become more athletic.
I see. Just I heard this 3 or 4 weeks ago that they're forming a women's professional softball league,
Hmm.
and I think MLB is involved somehow. I don't know exactly how.
That would be very important if they were.
No, I think they were. I think they are. I just think, and I think it is important that they like you know, much like Daniel Stern was a driving force behind the WNBA
Right. They need that
and
stability
the
in the
NHL
backing.
teams. I believe the NHL teams are very supportive of the PWHL. I'm not sure about our the commissioner. I'm sure he is, but
Fuck him.
he's kind of a non-entity in my book.
Such a butthead.
I did not see the awarding of the cup the other night. Did you?
Well, that's where I wanted to take us next, actually,
Well,
was
was Batman booed again like he
I
does every year?
I didn't watch the end of it because I didn't care to see
I
it.
turned it off
I
actually, so
turned
I
it off.
couldn't tell you.
Um, but as we um finish up one part of the show, and I just want to touch on a couple of recent things that have happened in the sports world. We are going to be coming back to women in athletics, women in sports.
Well, let me
Um,
just before we
yes,
move on,
if you want to
let me
finish
just
up,
finish up one thing because there's
sure.
one thing I do want to talk about that I
Yeah.
just want to tie up the Alice Marble uh, discussion. Did she was named to the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 1964. So obviously her contributions to the sport were recognized. So that's all I wanted to say. So we'll tie up those three. So those three are the initial uh, pioneers, so to speak, like you
Mhm.
called them earlier, who really pushed their sports in a forward direction.
Two tennis players and possibly three tennis players because Babe Didrikson probably could have done whatever
Well,
she
she
wanted.
probably could have
Yeah.
played tennis too. Yeah. She was that good an athlete.
So, yes, I wanted to pivot to an out of concern of making myself nauseous. I don't want to talk about the Panthers that much, but the Panthers won the Stanley Cup since the last time we recorded. I guess the question I did want to ask is, why did they win, and what, maybe more importantly, what did Edmonton not have?
Well, and I think you and I
What were they
discussed it.
missing?
I think you
Yeah.
and I discussed it the other day. I just don't
Yeah,
think
but everyone wasn't with
Edmonton.
us then, so we gotta
Okay,
talk about
yeah,
it now.
I think Edmonton is just their roster has holes in it. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup winning organization at this time. I think they have two of the best players in the world, and they cover up a lot of flaws. I think
It's weird how that
just,
happens, huh?
I just don't see. Now, there was a discussion the other day, or I was reading something the other day, and I don't know how. I'm really not sure if I agree with that being the reason, but Darnell Nurse has a hefty contract,
And I don't know that he's worth that.
which, well, that's what they're saying. Is he worth it? And is that contract causing the Oilers the inability to go out and get other players who would be better fits for a Stanley Cup run? So I just don't. I think there's probably
I'm curious what he's making this year because I hope
it's
I hope it's not.
I think it's
I
a
hope
lot
is
compared to
it?
what he does. I don't have the figures in front of me.
Whoa, wow,
Well, did you find him?
yeah, that is a lot of money. 10 million.
Woo. Wow.
I was hoping it wasn't going to be like five, and they were bitching about it, but 10 is a lot. But you know what? The GM hamstrung them to that deal,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they signed the damn thing, or they offered the damn thing. He signed it. Now, he is then susceptible to criticism for not meeting the expectations of a $10 million contract, but
right, right.
whew, that's a lot of money
So
for
the
a
interesting,
defenseman who I don't know, was he put up that many points?
I know he scored a goal in the finals. I don't know how many. I don't know what his point total is for the year. And another discussion, which might be interesting for us to talk about, not now, but maybe towards the end of next season, is I believe after the next season, is McDavid a free agent?
I think
I think he
he's
is. I think
got,
he is,
yeah, I think,
which will be interesting.
yeah, 1 year from July 1st.
Okay, so
He's 28.
that will be interesting. Interesting, interesting free agency period next year.
Ooh, I'd be sweating some bullets if I were them right now.
Well, I think that I just if I'm reading between the lines, I did see some post-game comments, and if I read between the lines, I know there's frustration there, which is normal for having lost the cup
I'd be
now
more curious how he feels in another month.
2 years in a row. But yeah, we'll see how it feels in a
I mean,
while.
at least
But
they're getting to the cup for Christ's sake. We couldn't even get to the
I
playoffs.
know, no,
They're
they're getting the
complaining
cup,
about
and
not
they
winning the
got
cup. That series was 2-2. It was 2-2 going back to Edmonton.
yeah. And the other thing I was going to discuss regarding your question is I'm not sure if we're talking, world-class goaltender, which it seems like you need those to win a cup.
Couldn't you also say that, and
I,
this is gonna be hard to disagree with the way that I'm asking it, but couldn't you also say that Florida just got more bounces?
I think they did, yes.
Because Edmonton was a bounce away from being up 2-0,
Hmm.
hold and serve at home, going to Florida with
Hmm.
Florida needing to win game three.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. No, I think they got some bounces, and I think you need that
But that's what
to
you
win a
need to
cup.
get to win a cup.
Yeah, yeah. And you need bounces to win any championship. You need bounces to win the Super Bowl. You need bounces to win the Cup. You need bounces to win the NBA championship.
I
You need
give,
bounces to win the World Series.
feel
So
like
yeah,
have we not earned a season's full of bounces in the NFL for crying out loud? An
you
entire
would think
season's
so.
full all the way through to a Super Bowl victory.
You would think so.
Jesus. Okay. Um, Other thing I wanted to talk about. Have you seen the devolution or evolution, depending on how you feel about him, of um Brad Marchand's spiral after this? I really can't stand him being a Sabres fan, but I have seen some video of his I guess I call it you call it a bender, I guess, but it doesn't seem to be uh it's not really hurting anybody. Have
Right,
you
right.
have you seen have you seen this?
I
Just
have not
the
seen that. No, I
absurdities.
have not. I have not seen that. You're gonna
He
have
was
to
at a
enlighten me on
he
that.
was at a Dairy Queen, serving out the window of a Dairy
Yeah.
Queen. Um, there was video of him. Is it this morning or yesterday morning? Of Sasha Barkov in a Finland jersey because he is Finnish. He is Finnish. I think he had like his own Finnish jersey on, but they were dragging Martian out of a club and like he was trying to wiggle away from them and get back into the club. Like, I don't know,
I did
like
not
it,
see that. I did not
but
see that.
yeah,
I just learned I didn't know Barkov was a Finn. I thought he was a Russian.
no, he's not. He's Finnish.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you
I
go.
thought the same thing too, and that's why I know that. Um,
I well, again, I didn't see that with Marchand, though I'm not surprised at all. But I also think, Marchand's that type of guy that if he's playing against you, we talked about this earlier. He's a rat. He's a pain in the rear end.
mhm.
He can take a lot of liberties and get away with stuff.
I really don't. I
He
really can't
needles
stand
you,
that shit.
but again, if he played for
Your
our team,
team, we'd love him.
we would love him. So
Yeah, Barkov is from Tampere, Finland,
okay,
which I believe is that also where Solani is from? I think he is also from there.
it does ring a bell.
Yeah.
I
Um,
and I was reading today, and again, some of these things that pop up on social media is ridiculous. But I was reading today about potential. It wasn't anything that people have been inside angle, but where's Marchand going to go next year? Because he is a free agent. Is he going to stay in Florida? There's talk about the Leafs. So
I think he's gonna stay there.
where in Florida?
Yeah.
Well, it would make sense because they're most likely
I think at this
primed to
point
take a
in
run
his
again.
career, he doesn't need the money. He wants the rings,
Yeah, he wants the rings.
and he's already won three now.
Hmm.
So
He's probably at the point where he's probably not going to play much longer.
Right. So,
So,
these need to be deep playoff runs. These
and
need to be cup potential years.
I did hear that Florida is certainly interested in retaining him, but they did mention the fact that he might have to take a
Take that.
discounted offer. So we
Well,
shall see.
as we discussed, he can maybe, because there's no income tax,
That's true. Well, there you go. That's
afford to do
true.
that.
That's very true.
Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss tonight? As I
Yes, I
believe,
do want to set up our next episode
hmm.
if you want me to do that.
And to give an idea of where we are right now tonight, the in about 6 minutes, the NBA Finals Game Seven is gonna
Oh, great. Great.
be
So
start.
we can talk NBA. We can comment on the NBA finals next show
Yeah.
after we talk about Billie Jean King. So our next show will be pretty much a show dedicated to Billie Jean King, what she has done for women's sports. But I also,
How about just humanity?
well, that's what I'm going to
Done for
say.
humanity.
Humanity, or for sports in general, or people in general. She's constantly traveling. She's in France now. She's amazing at her age. She's constantly on the road.
Mhm.
She's a driving force, like we talked about, behind equal pay uh, for women and men at the slams, uh, better pay for women, tennis players, and professional athletes in other sports, women. She's a driving force behind the PWHL. So she's very, just one of the greats all the way around. But just wanted to talk a little bit about your interaction with her. Yes, you did have an interaction with the great Billie Jean King.
I did, though I
Shortly
don't.
after she retired from playing,
So yeah, she's
we
still.
were in Marco Island, Florida, and it was during the tournament which we spoke about earlier.
Mhm.
And Billie Jean was working with a couple of the pros down there. I believe one of the pros she was working with was Gabriella Sabatini. I believe she was on the practice court. Sabatini was working with another young player.
Mhm.
And we were watching practices. And you were dragging a tennis racket, and you were probably maybe three, and you had your head down, and you
Which I
ran
still
into
do.
what you still do, and you ran into a pair of knees. And
Mm.
I looked at those knees, and those knees had like scars all over them. And I looked up, and as I was looking up, Miss King was messing up your hair a little bit, saying, "Hey, little guy,
Which
you
at
met the
that
great
time,
Billie Jean King."
would have been blonde and curly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was allowed in tennis facilities because I did not make noise as a
That's
child.
right. That's right. Whereas your sister
That's right.
probably couldn't have been in a tennis facility at that
No,
age.
no.
But yeah, so you met the great Billie Jean King, and I wish I was so caught off guard. I didn't really have much to say to her, which I would have loved to say a lot. But
Yeah,
it was nice that she, was very, you know, sweet towards you and said hello, and that was neat. So I always remember that.
yeah.
So your touch with your
That,
intersection with greatness.
right. It's a cool story. It's a cool story to
Oh, it was.
talk about.
And it's great that, she's still out there. I follow her on social media.
Hmm.
She's still out there
Important
getting
voice for
into,
justice
yeah,
and
justice,
equality and
politics.
equity,
Yeah, yeah.
fairness.
And
And we'll talk about her um, in a future episode.
yes, we're going to talk about her and about her dedication and her what she's given back to the game of tennis and sports in general and society in general. And then we're going to move on, as I said, we'll be talking about what we're going to do. We'll follow that up with the discussion of Title IX. And
Mhm.
this is where you come in with your background in in sports management and analytics, and we're gonna we're gonna dissect what Title IX is because I don't even know the formula that's used by collegiate programs.
And I'll be able to speak to it as I as of 2008 or so, and
Right.
stuff has
Right.
likely changed, maybe substantially, but I still think the general idea is still there, so I'll be able to speak on that. And then I know we also have the NHL draft coming up soon, so
Yes, we'll be
at the
talking about.
risk of turning off viewers, we might talk about some Sabres again, for crying out loud.
Well, we need to, and they need to get they
Yeah,
really need to get their act together. And we've been talking about them, you and I, off camera, and I know there's some disgruntled players, but
I don't want to hear it.
like I said, wouldn't anybody be disgruntled having been on this team for 14 years? Well, they haven't been on the team for 14 years, but we haven't seen
No,
the
but I've had to
playoffs.
suffer through it for 14
Well,
years,
so have I,
for
and
Christ's sake.
I'm every year I buy my center ice package, and
Flush that down the toilet.
this past year I didn't watch maybe five Sabre games,
I think that's about what I watched.
all before they had their 13 game losing
That
streak.
epic collapse.
It seems to be part of the season every year.
Every effing year right now. Okay, well, let's not step on that too much because it's so damn exciting. Did you have anything else to touch on before
I
we
think
sign
that's it.
off?
I
All
think
right.
that's it, Matt.
Well, thank you for listening to episode six of from the Arena. These episodes will be available on Apple Podcasts as well as video on YouTube. And you can find us or drop us a line at our Facebook page, excuse me, at Echoes from the Arena. And we're also, I think, on Instagram as well.
Yes, we are.
Uh, yeah, we have that name as well too. So any of those avenues would work nicely, and we should have the show up shortly. So thanks for tuning in.